Every advanced chip that has ever been printed, every logic gate switching inside every data center rack running today, was made by shining light through a stencil. That stencil is called a photomask, and before the mask carries a single circuit geometry. Before the electron beam writes the first line, the mask begins as a blank, a rectangle of synthetic quartz roughly the size of a paperback book, polished to a flatness whose deviation is measured in fractions of a wavelength of visible light, coated in a precise multi-layer film, and inspected to a defect density so low that a single misplaced particle would corrupt every chip printed from it. That blank almost certainly left a factory in Japan. If China can write the pattern but cannot make the canvas, the stencil is borrowed. And the question worth tracing is whether that borrowing can be ended before the lenders decide to stop lending. The dependency map in this story is not the chip, and it is not the lithography tool everyone already argues about. It is the substrate beneath the mask's first mark. A change in semiconductor independence is not a faster chip. It is a new line drawn on that map, a line around a node that used to be a dead end. This is a story about one node where the bypass is still mostly theory, and about mapping exactly where the line terminates. Picture that blank arriving at a Chinese mask shop, sitting unwritten on the loading dock, waiting for the electron beam to give it meaning. The shop it has entered is real. China operates several mask shops, some state-supported, and some commercially run, that produce photomasks in volume. For a large portion of chips, the country actually manufactures at scale: power semiconductors, display drivers, certain analog devices. The mask writing capability is genuine. The electron beam writers for these older process node masks were acquired before export controls tightened on this equipment category, or are now available from domestic suppliers. Defect inspection for masks at these specifications uses tools that are broadly accessible. The shops are running, and the masks are shipping. The line gets complicated when the geometry shrinks. Leading-edge logic, the sub-100 nanometer feature sizes that advanced chips require, demands electron beam writers capable of multi-beam patterning at extremely fine resolution. The dominant suppliers for that category of tool are Japanese and European companies. Defect inspection at that specification relies heavily on equipment from a small number of firms, and reports identify KLA as a major presence in that inspection segment. Both the writers and the inspection tools are subject to export licensing pressure. Reports of domestic Chinese development programs for leading-edge mask writing equipment exist, and some describe machines in testing, but independently confirmed volume production of leading-edge masks through purely domestic tooling has not been reported. Think of the mask shop as a print shop that runs excellent presses for most of the jobs it receives. But the jobs requiring the highest resolution need a typesetting machine the shop cannot yet reliably order, and the ones it has are aging toward their limits. Node: patterned photomask, leading edge. Status: Chokepoint. With a bypass under construction, domestic mask writing is real and operating for mature process nodes. For leading-edge geometries, the writing tools and inspection equipment remain largely imported or access-controlled, and domestic alternatives are in reported development without confirmed volume at that specification. My read on this node is that it is real, but it is also the least structurally interesting choke point in this web. Writing tools are machines. Machines can, in principle, be built or acquired through roundabout routes. The history of technology transfer is full of cases where a controlled machine eventually reached a determined buyer through enough intermediaries. The blank beneath the mask is a different kind of problem. It is a materials process, and materials processes are the slowest things in any supply chain to transfer. The moment a mask shop can write a flawless pattern, but cannot guarantee the substrate beneath it is defect-free, the shop's capability is theoretical. The pattern lives on the blank, and the blank has its own line to trace. Follow the blank backward, away from the mask shop and toward its origin. Before the electron beam touched it, it had to exist. A standard photomask blank begins with synthetic quartz, fused silica of exceptional purity, ground and polished to atomic flatness. The surface roughness of a finished blank is below a fraction of a nanometer. Then a film stack is deposited on that polished surface, a chromium layer for conventional blanks used in most production, or a molybdenum silicon bilayer for phase shift blanks used in more demanding applications. This film stack must be uniform in thickness across the entire substrate, repeatable from blank to blank, and chemically consistent through the entire deposition run. When the blank leaves the production line, it is inspected. That inspection must find any particle, any pit, any thickness variation that falls outside an extremely tight specification, because a defect that exists before the pattern is written will survive into the pattern, and will then survive into every wafer printed from that mask, and into every chip diced from every wafer. The companies that do this at leading-edge specification are concentrated. Shin-Etsu Chemical is among the names that recur in this segment of the web. The company's own public materials describe its position in synthetic quartz and photomask blank supply. Hoya is another name reported in the same supply cluster. The concentration is not accidental. A market requiring tolerances this extreme tends to consolidate around the 2 or 3 process lineages that solved it first, because the qualification process for a new entrant is itself years of accumulated learning. A new supplier does not just need a polishing machine and a deposition chamber. It needs a statistical record of blank-to-blank consistency, a defect database earned through production runs, and relationships with mask shops willing to run qualification lots on an unproven substrate. All of that takes time that the blank specification does not accelerate. This is where I want to push back on the version of this story that dismisses the blank as a commodity. I have tested that read, and I think it is wrong. The specification that makes a leading-edge blank usable is not the material itself. Synthetic quartz is not rare, and the basic chemistry of chromium deposition is not secret. What makes the blank hard is the absence of defects at a density so low that it requires inspection systems operating near the frontier of what detection hardware can resolve. The blank is not hard because the quartz is exotic. It is hard because zero defect tolerance is a manufacturing discipline, and manufacturing disciplines are accumulated over production cycles, not installed with a machine. Chinese domestic production of photomask blanks is reported. Several domestic suppliers are identified in commercial and trade coverage. Whether those blanks meet the specifications required for advanced node mask making is a different question, and the answer to it is not confirmed in any independent public benchmark. The grade ceiling of domestic Chinese blanks is asserted by the companies developing them, but independent mask shops running qualification lots on those blanks and publishing the yield results. That record is not yet visible in public reporting. Think of the blank the way a photographer thinks about glass plates. The camera, the darkroom, the developer chemistry, all of that is the mask shop. The glass plate is the blank. A scratch embedded in the plate before the image is taken is a scratch in every print made from it, forever, regardless of how skilled the photographer. No amount of craft in the exposure fixes a flaw that preceded the image. The mask shop's capability is downstream of the blank's quality, and if the blank comes from a source that cannot certify its own defect density at advanced specification, the mask shop's leading-edge capability is built on an uncertain foundation. Node: high-grade photomask blank. Status: Chokepoint. With no domestic line confirmed. Domestic blank production is reported, but independent confirmation that those blanks meet advanced node specifications is absent. Shin-Etsu and a small cluster of Japanese suppliers remain the source of record for the blanks that leading-edge mask shops require. The line does not stop at the blank. Follow it one step further, back to what the blank itself is made from. Synthetic quartz begins as a boule, a large block of fused silica grown under controlled conditions from high-purity feedstock, typically silicon tetrachloride or purified silicon dioxide. China has synthetic quartz production capacity. This is documented across commercial surveys and geological reporting. The boule is sliced into plates, the plates are ground through coarser abrasive steps, and then the polishing sequence begins. Each stage uses progressively finer abrasive chemistry, and the final polishing steps use precision consumables, pads and slurries, whose composition and consistency directly determine the surface quality of the finished blank. The film deposition step that follows uses physical vapor deposition tools available from multiple suppliers around the world. The tool itself is not the single-country choke point here. Where the upstream line does not close is inspection. A blank polished to sub-nanometer roughness and coated with a film stack of controlled thickness still has to be measured before it ships. The inspection system must be sensitive enough to find a defect smaller than any standard optical instrument can resolve. That inspection capability maps onto the same segment where KLL appears repeatedly in public coverage of the semiconductor supply web, the metrology and inspection category, where domestic Chinese alternatives are in reported development, but where no confirmation at advanced node specification has emerged. Making the blank's ingredients is like running a quarry that mines good stone and a masonry shop that cuts it cleanly. What the finished blank requires at the end of its production line is a quality control instrument that can locate a single grain of sand anywhere in the completed floor. And that instrument is itself the product of a separate, equally concentrated supply chain, one that the blanks maker cannot simply pull off the shelf. Node, blank substrate process, polishing and inspection. Status, choke point. With a bypass under construction. Feedstock and deposition are partially domestic. Defect-level polishing chemistry and blank-grade inspection tools remain concentrated in a small number of foreign suppliers with domestic alternatives in reported development and no confirmed volume at advanced specification. Now follow the line to where it genuinely terminates. Not the conventional blank, but the blank that would be required if extreme ultraviolet lithography ever becomes available to Chinese fabs, through domestic development, through a future policy shift, through any path the next decade produces. An extreme ultraviolet photomask blank is not a modified version of a conventional blank. It is a different object. Extreme ultraviolet light does not transmit through quartz the way deep ultraviolet light does. The optics of extreme ultraviolet lithography are entirely reflective, not transmissive. The blank for an extreme ultraviolet mask is a substrate of low thermal expansion glass, a composition engineered to maintain its dimensions with extreme precision as temperatures shift during exposure. Coated not with a chromium absorber, but with a multi-layer reflective stack. That stack is typically molybdenum and silicon layers, alternating in dozens of pairs, each layer's thickness controlled to within fractions of a nanometer, uniform across the entire substrate. A defect in this reflective stack, at the right location, prints as a defect on every chip produced from that mask, and below a certain defect size, no repair technique can fix it. The extreme ultraviolet blank begins closer to the edge of what materials science can do, and every step from glass composition through multi-layer deposition through defect inspection sits harder against that edge than the equivalent step for a conventional blank. The strongest case that this is a permanent dead end is that it compounds three separate accumulated disciplines simultaneously: the low thermal expansion glass composition, the multi-layer reflective deposition uniformity, and the inspection sensitivity at a level that requires metrology equipment near the frontier of what detection hardware can achieve at all. No shortcut through one of those three bypasses the others. Reports indicate that no Chinese supplier has demonstrated extreme ultraviolet class blanks at any production volume, and the inspection tools required to certify them face the same export control environment that covers other advanced semiconductor equipment. The strongest counterargument I can make to my own read here is structural. China's semiconductor investment programs are sustained and government-directed, and the blank problem is not invisible to the people managing those programs. Development efforts targeting synthetic quartz, reflective coatings, and metrology equipment are underway according to multiple reports. And there is a version of this argument that says the extreme ultraviolet blank is solving a problem China does not yet have, because the scanners that expose through those blanks are themselves blocked at the border. I find that framing unconvincing as a structural claim. The network does not freeze at today's node generation. It extends forward into whatever configuration becomes accessible. If extreme ultraviolet tools eventually reach Chinese fabs, through any route the coming decade produces, the blank becomes the binding constraint at that moment, retroactively, regardless of how distant it looked today. The extreme ultraviolet blank is the node where both arguments hold simultaneously and neither resolves. The bypass is not built. The incentive to build it is real. And the compounding difficulty of three separate disciplines means even a well-funded program faces a timeline measured in years, not months, with no confirmed endpoint. Now the map is complete enough to read. Several lines in it are already domestic. Chinese mask shops run at volume for older process nodes. That line is closed. Synthetic quartz feedstock, the raw material at the far end of the blank supply chain, is available domestically. That upstream ingredient is not the binding node. Film deposition tooling for standard conventional blanks is broadly available from multiple global suppliers. No single country choke point sits at that equipment level. Those bypasses are real and they matter. What remains open is more specific and more consequential. High-grade mask blanks for advanced nodes are still concentrated among Japanese suppliers, with no domestically confirmed alternative that has been benchmarked at the required specification. Leading-edge mask writing tools and the defect inspection equipment for advanced photomasks remain largely export-controlled, with domestic alternatives in development and without confirmed production volume. And the extreme ultraviolet class blank has no confirmed domestic production anywhere in reported Chinese output, with the inspection capability to certify such a blank itself absent and the timeline to build it uncertain and long. My read of this web is that the mask blank is the quietest choke point in the entire semiconductor dependency map. It sits one step behind the lithography tool that dominates public discussion, invisible in most coverage, and it is the node where the bypass is least developed relative to how close it sits to the actual print step. The pattern written on the mask can be Chinese. The writing tool can, in principle, become Chinese through development or acquisition. But the canvas that the pattern is written on still travels from Japan to the mask shop. And that leg of the supply line has no domestic alternative at advanced specification. Everything downstream of the blank, the written mask, the exposed wafer, the finished chip, inherits that dependency quietly, invisibly, one substrate at a time. That unwritten blank that arrived at the mask shop before the electron beam touched it is the honest measure of where the map actually closes. The pattern is domestic. The canvas is not. And a stencil drawn on a borrowed substrate is not an independent stencil. It is a stencil with a condition attached, and the condition belongs to the supplier. A new line on the dependency map is not drawn when a chip is fabbed. It is drawn when the substrate beneath the mask's first mark comes from a domestic source at verified specification. Until that line exists, the map has a gap where it looks closed. The web is not broken at the chip. It is incomplete at the canvas, and the canvas is the part no one is watching. The question worth leaving open: the Japanese suppliers who anchor this node have decades of process control accumulated in that specification. Which of the three sub-disciplines in the extreme ultraviolet blank gives first to a domestic Chinese alternative? The glass composition, the multi-layer reflective stack, or the inspection metrology? And how many production cycles does a credible program need to close the gap? If you're tracking any of those programs, the comment section is the right place for it. If this kind of supply chain cartography is useful to you, subscribing keeps the next segment of the map in your feed.